But what I'm going to show you in this video is how to move electrical across the wall. That's right, how to move electrical sideways across several studs in your wall. I'm going to show you step by step everything it takes. There is a little bit of cutting of drywall. I'm going to show you how to repair that as well and make it look like nothing ever happened. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. Where we are at right now is our new home gym. I just built this casita and I have the home gym finished and I got all the drywall done. And after putting everything in and figuring out where I was going to lay it out, I actually needed an extra outlet. I had previously put an outlet up above here, which we ended up using for a squat rack area. And I'm not going to be able to put a TV up there. We're actually going to put it over here to the left where this mirror is at now. And I need to have electrical in the wall so that I can put this mirror here. I have to cut into this brand new drywall. So it is the last thing that I want to do. So if you're worried about cutting into drywall and repairing it, I'll walk you through it. I'll show you kind of like a beginner step of how to repair it. But the electrical portion of it is very straightforward. I'll walk you through everything, but do not be afraid. You can do this yourself. It doesn't cost that much money, but I'm going to walk you through all of it. And we're going to start with first looking at where we want to put our electrical. Where I'm at right here, we need to move the electrical about 3 to 4 feet to the right. Then we're going to go vertical in the wall, which I have other videos about, but I will also show you that here. So before we do anything and start messing with this electrical, let's turn off the power. Always turn off the power before you work on any electrical. And then we're going to mark out where our studs are. I'm doing this visually here in the video and I'm using a stud finder and I'm going to mark with tape, just kind of showing you where these studs are. And that's because I need to kind of expect how much work and also if I can get that outlet to the area that I need so that I can then go vertical up in between these two windows. And speaking of windows, I can expect at least 2 studs to be right by the edge of this window. We have a jack stud and a king stud. One runs up to the base of the window. The other one runs all the way up to the ceiling. So I can expect at least 2 studs in that location. And then I'm going to be probably jumping across 1 or 2 other cripples, which are the shorter studs that are underneath the window. So I should expect to drill through about 3 to 4 studs when I'm doing this job. Before we get too deep into this, anything that I'm using in the video, any products or the electrical items or whatever it is, I listed everything down in the description. So if you need to pick something up or if you have any questions about what it is or where I got it, you can write me in the comments or you can look in the description and it should be listed down there. But now that we have everything laid out and I can see where my studs are, I'm then going to mark about a 4-inch piece, about horizontal lines at about 4 inches. And the reason that this is important, once we remove that piece of drywall and we're going to start drilling through the studs, this is where I see a lot of people make a mistake. You're going to need to fit the head of your drill in there and you want to center your hole so that you don't have to put any nailing plates and you don't have to worry about screwing through your electrical in the wall. So it's very important that you center your hole when you are drilling through these, and it's hard to do that if you don't have enough room in that piece of drywall that you cut out. So plan ahead. I usually mark about 4 inches, but at least the width of your drill that you're using. That way you can actually get it in the wall, which you'll see in a later step. Real quick, if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe. Let me know how you feel in the comments. And also, I finally got my website up, fortknoxcompany.com. I sell t-shirts on there that I design and I print myself. Everything that I sell has a flag on the sleeve, so it is a little patriotic, but it's just another way that you can support me and the channel. But either way, I appreciate you watching, so hit like, hit subscribe, or grab yourself a cool t-shirt. Now back to the build. So we have our studs marked. We can also mark our lines on the wall where we plan on cutting. Then we're going to go ahead and start working on this first outlet, the original outlet. We're going to remove the outlet that's there, straighten out these wires. Then we're going to actually remove this old box. The benefit to doing this is that you can put in a new old work box and it has a little bit more room in there for the extra set of wires that we're going to be adding. But it's very simple. You put a screwdriver between where the stud is and the box and then push that screwdriver towards the box. If you do not do that and you push the screwdriver towards the drywall, you will actually cause more damage to the drywall and you won't see very much movement in your box that you want to create a little gap at. So put the screwdriver in there and then push it towards the box, and we're just trying to get enough space so that we can get the blade of our Sawzall in there, and we're going to cut both nails that are holding this box in. And this is done just like I said. We're going to put your blade in there and put it at kind of an extreme angle because we want to try to hit that nail without cutting too deep through the drywall. So let the weight of the saw just kind of sit on that nail and it should cut through it pretty easy. Have good control over it so we don't end up going too far and then we don't cause any damage to that drywall there. Then you can do the same thing, do it up at the top, and you can zip that nail. The 2 nails are pretty easy to cut. Then we're going to leave this and let it sit because once we remove the drywall strip, it's actually a lot easier to get that box out. But if you're ever just running electrical vertical, this is where we would remove that box and deal with our wires and fish our line straight up. But again, we're going to be moving sideways. So since we're going to cut that strip of drywall out, I'm just letting that box sit there because again, I don't want to cause any more damage to the drywall than necessary. So I'm going to zip that piece out. Then I'll have a lot more room to to remove that box. So the next step now is to cut that drywall. I'm going to be using my multi-tool with one of these drywall bits, again, very commonly found, but we're going to cut straight across on that marked line. Again, just try to make this nice and clean because the goal is to remove this all as one piece so that we can use this same piece to replace it and patch it back up. Now, once you get this cut, if it does not pull out, do not pull on it. Again, you don't want to break it, but there is a chance that there's a screw or a nail when this drywall was put up that is behind that piece that you cut. So what I did here was I took a magnet, which was on the end of my measuring tape, and I just kind of ran it across where I knew my studs were, and I found one screw. I removed a little bit of that drywall there, and I could see the screw was there. I was able to take that screw out, and I was able to pull the piece out. So that one screw was the only thing holding it still in place. But make sure that you've cut all the way through, and then again, you don't have any screws or nails holding it, and that piece should just come right out. Now you can see inside the wall here, we have some insulation. This is on an exterior wall, so that is something if you're ever doing electrical work, you should expect to find insulation in that wall on any of the exterior of your house. It is not very common to find insulation on the interior walls of your house, but anytime you're working on the exterior, you should expect that. This can be difficult when you're running that electrical, especially even just going vertical. That's why having a good fishing tape is good to use, but it will help push through that material. Here we have everything open, so again, I can push it back when I drill my holes. So now that we have that piece removed, I'm gonna then remove that old box that we just cut. I'm gonna straighten those wires out. It helps kind of get it through the back of it because sometimes it will grab. So straighten those wires out and you should be able to get that box out, no problem. Now we're gonna drill our holes. I am using a 9/16, and this is where when you run your Romex, your electrical wire, you wanna use something that's not too big because again, we don't wanna remove too much material from these studs, but we do wanna be able to pass this wire through. So I would say something at a 1/2 inch or slightly more, which is 9/16. That allowed me to pass a single wire through. I'm gonna do my best to center it in the studs. This gives me enough meat or enough wood on both sides so that I don't need a nailing plate. These are 2x6 exterior walls, so I do have a lot of room to work with, but even if you're working with that 2x4 wall, it should be okay. If you want to put a nailing plate over that area, you can, but again, we are going to be screwing this piece back in place. So when you go to screw this piece back in place, remember, you ran your wire down the middle, so you might want to put a screw above and below when you put the drywall back on. But if you have a nailing plate there, that can also prevent you putting a screw or a nail somewhere you don't want. But we are going to drill these holes straight through, and again, I'm able to fit my drill all the way inside because I cut a wide enough piece of drywall out, and that allows me to center it and not have to cut at any angles. The 3 studs that we have here that are underneath the window, I'm able to easily get through that. If you ever come across a situation where you don't have a drill bit that's long enough, I would say get a longer drill bit, or you might have to open up the drywall past it so you can drill it from both sides. But the goal here is to create a pass through each piece of that wood. Now at this point, if you did not need to move the outlet up like I'm about to do, this is where you would just simply mark and cut out the outlet opening that you need, and we can fish that wire through the holes that we just drilled, and it can be simple as that, just running it across and then putting the drywall back. But I am going to show you the method that we use when we move the outlet up. So this is very similar to when you're doing it from an outlet that you have and you just want to go straight up, except I'm obviously going to the side and up. So this is kind of like a combination of both, but if you only need to move it over, this is where you'd be able to cut out that hole and install the new outlet box, and then we'll get to the wiring part at the end. So if you do not need to move the outlet up, you can skip forward a little bit. I'll be covering the wiring and installation of the new outlet as well as the drywall here at the end. Now we are at the part where I'm going to move the electrical up the wall. So I'm going to mark the location of where I want this new outlet. This is going to be above my mirror line, which I'm going to be running right at the bottom of the windows. So I'm going up about another foot so that I'm behind the TV where it should be mounted. And I'm going to mark the outside of my old work box. Whenever we're doing this, make sure you start small. So mark around the smallest part of that perimeter and then cut that out. And if you do need to widen it, you can always take away a little bit more material, but get that cut out with your multi-tool. Again, very straightforward. Then we can test fit the box. If the box ever does get stuck when you put it in, remember it has those little tabs that when you put it in there, gravity's just going to kind of pop that bottom one down. So you might have to take a screwdriver and just turn it to pull it back out. But do a test fit, then we can move on to the next part where we actually start running our new electrical wire. And in this portion, this is where I'm going to use my fishing tape. I am going to want to go vertical in this wall, and I do have insulation to get through. So trying to push the wire by itself will be a little bit difficult. So I'm just going to not waste any time, push this wire through the top. I can catch it down at the bottom. Then I'm going to tape my electrical wire to the bottom of that fishing tape, and I can pull it back through. Make sure that when you tape around it, that you tape over the edges so it doesn't grab or catch anything. So just make sure it has a smooth transition. But if you're going a short distance, it shouldn't be a problem. And we're going to go straight up the wall here, so it should be able to follow the back of the drywall. So we're just going to pull that straight up through, and now we have electrical coming out of our new location, and we have our wire down at the bottom where we cut our strip out. We can then cut our wire to length so we can take that end piece and feed it through the holes that we just drilled. I'm going to go a little bit long on this so I have some room to play with. We can then feed that wire through those those studs and the holes that we just drilled, and it's gonna go all the way over to the new location where we had our original box. Now really the hard part is done. We have our original electrical, we have our new wire going through and up. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up at the new location. I'm gonna install my old work box. I'm gonna feed that wire through, strip it back, connect my new outlet. I love using these Leviton Decoras. They have the tabs on the back where you push the wire in and then you click and you're done. It secures the wire easy, it's fast, it's nice and clean. And also if you ever have to remove the outlet, it's very easy to uninstall and reinstall the outlet. So I'll get everything finished up there. Old work box is secure, new outlet is wired in, and we have our faceplate done. So this upper location where the new outlet is finished. Now we can go back down here to the old location and we're gonna install another old work box. This will grab on the drywall that we have. Even though we don't have that strip filled in yet, I wanna get everything wired in, and then I'm gonna test my electrical before I close it all up. So these tabs on the old work box will grab on the two pieces of drywall above and below the box. So I'm gonna secure that box in after feeding all my wires through. Now we have 3 sets of wires, so this is where it can get a little tricky for people. That's why I like removing the old box, because it does give us more room to work, but I can install a little bit bigger box. So they have 14 cubic inch boxes, and then they have some upgraded 20 cubic inch boxes. Those are really nice when you're working with 3 or 4 sets of wires. So with that new box there and the 3 sets of wires, we're gonna do something that's called pigtailing. I believe that's the definition. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but I've always heard it referred to as pigtailing. It's where you're gonna bring your 3 power sources, let's just say the black wires. We're gonna bring our 3 black wires together, and then we're gonna come off of that with a 4th wire, and that lead is gonna go to the outlet. So we're sharing all the power from the black. We branch it off with just 1 wire, so the connection to the outlet has just 1 black, 1 white, and 1 ground. We're gonna do the same thing with the neutrals and the grounds, bringing them all together and then coming off with 1/4 wire that goes to the outlet. This allows the power to jump from outlet to outlet to outlet, and we don't have a bunch of wires twisted together under some wing nut. And when we do this pigtail method, I like to use these Wago connectors. I use them on all the jobs now because it creates a lot of space inside of the outlet box. If you've ever done any electrical work before, you'll see that the correct wing nut, the caps that go on those twisted wires when you bind them all together, they're huge. And when you start putting 3 or 4 of those inside of this outlet box, it takes up a lot of space. With the Wago connectors, I can connect up to 5 wires, and it's very slim. It's very easy to connect and disconnect. But my biggest reason for using them is how much space that they save. So we're gonna tie all of our wires together, coming off with a 4th that attaches to my outlet. I have a clean connection at the outlet. I can nicely tuck all these wires back into that original box location. Then I can secure my outlet, and I can go turn my power on, and then I can check it. I'm gonna check my circuit with my circuit tester. I have power at the original location, and I also have power at the new location. So all the hard work is done. We have our new electrical there. Now the last step is repairing that drywall. Now for this drywall, this is a different skill set, not necessarily the electrician skill set, but if you can master this or practice at it, it is life-saving. If you've ever owned a home or rented or anything and you had to fix any drywall, this skill is invaluable. So it is not expensive to mess with. Drywall material is very, very cheap, but it takes a little bit of technique and practice. The time that you put into it will obviously reflect your end result. So I think where some people kind of mess up with drywall is they don't want to wait for it to dry, or they just think that 1 coat is good enough and then it never really looks as good as they wanted it. I'm telling you from experience, do that extra coat. Maybe it's a 3rd coat, but that extra time that you put into it will make it look 10 times better. So before we put this drywall piece back in place, the side over here to where the outlet is at needs a little bit of support. So this is the same technique like if you're ever patching a hole and you need to have some support to screw your actual piece of drywall into. I don't want to leave this edge just hanging there. The other side's okay, but this side right here by the outlet is going to have some pressure with plugging stuff in. So I want to make sure that it's supported well. I'm just taking a scrap of 3/4 inch material, about 3 inches wide and long enough to cover the span of my opening and give me some room to screw above and below. A little trick here is I put a screw in the middle of it so that I can get it in place and hold it while I'm then putting in the top and bottom screw to hold it to the original drywall. So I just use that as like a center tab, and it allows me to put my screws in and not have to have my hand behind it. It's just kind of a little trick I see people do is put that screw in the middle and use it kind of like a handle. Once I have a screw above and below holding it in place, I can take that center screw out. Now, before we put the piece that we cut out back, I like to do this. I like to put a little bit of drywall mud all the way around the edges, and that kind of lets me squeeze it in there, and it should get a little bit of squeeze out around the edges. That just kind of helps give me a little bit of a bond on anything that was cut out, so it's kind of making it whole again. Creates a good seal, and I can then put my screws back in those studs so I can secure it. Now remember, we did put our wire through the middle, so try to put your screws above and below if you can, but usually if you're not using a screw that's too long, these are 1 5/8 5/8. You could probably go with 1.5. That's about a 1/2 inch material with about 1 inch going into the wood. You should be all right. Now here comes the fun part. We're going to tape and mud this. You've probably heard that term, tape and mud. I'm going to be using actual drywall tape, but they also have mesh out there. This allows you to have a wet seam, and where I see people make mistakes is they'll throw the tape on there and they either won't put any mud underneath or they just won't put enough. You want to put a layer of mud around that seam so that when you put your tape on top of it and you run your blade across of it, you're squeezing it out, kind of like squeezing toothpaste out of a toothpaste tube. You want to squeeze it out so that there's mud underneath the whole entire piece of tape. So we call that a wet seam, and that gives it a good bond between both surfaces. And the reason that we're taping these joints is to prevent any cracking. It does add a little bit of thickness to the wall, which is where we come in later and we fan out our extra layers of material to kind of smooth out the look of anything there on the wall. But right now we're just worried about taping these seams. If you do use the mesh, it's very similar. You're just going to put some mud down, and again, you can run your blade across it, but it obviously covers that mesh a little bit better. But again, it adds that strength across the seam to prevent any cracking. So we're going to do this on all 3 sides, and then I can already start with my first layer of mud going right across the top. We basically want to encase this in a layer of drywall compound, and I'm going to do that right now after I do my tape, and it's just going to be a nice thin layer. Don't overwork it. This is where, again, the patience comes in. We're going to have to come back to this at least 2 or 3 times to get it nice and smooth so that when we do our texture, we don't see those tape marks. So I just throw a little bit more compound on there, and I take my 6-inch blade and I just kind of fan it out as best I can, and then I let it sit. We want to make it look somewhat good here because it will reduce how much sanding we have to do. This again is where a little bit it gets messy. There are some methods to sand where you don't have any dust, where you can use like a damp drywall sponge, or you'll see like a tiling sponge. People will get those damp and you can kind of run it over the surface. Again, it kind of takes practice, but I just go ahead and do the traditional sanding, and then I vacuum up in between. When I did the work here in the room, I didn't have any of the equipment in here, so I wasn't as worried about getting any dust on stuff. So we can go ahead and let this sit and dry. If you are using a regular compound, it may take several hours, but it also depends on like what the temperature and humidity is in your house or in the area that you live. I also threw a fan on it a couple times just to kind of get some air across it. They also do sell material that is made for quick repairs, and it dries in like 10 or 15 minutes. The only problem with using that is that it will set up on you very fast. So if you haven't done any drywall work before, I would just go with the regular compound because it allows you to work it a little bit longer. So once that first layer is dry with the tape, I'm going to hit it with some sanding. I like using these sponge sanders because they really are nice. They kind of flex to the surface so it's not so rigid. It'll help knock down any of those high areas. We do want to remove some material, but we don't want to remove all the material. So once we have that kind of sanded down smooth, almost to the paper, we're going to hit it with another layer. When you're doing these other coats, you can use a little bit wider blade. That allows you to fan out the material a little bit. This is where having some practice helps, and you can play with it on a small job like this. It's kind of like icing a cake. It's hard to explain, but once you learn how to mix or move the material, you'll kind of see that we just want to get that fanning out. We want a really thin layer across this, but we do want to encase that tape, and we also want to transition from the original wall to the new piece or where that new seam is. We want to try to hide it with like a nice easy transition. We don't want a big ridge right there. So we're going to fan this material out, and once we're done with maybe the second or third coat of letting it dry, a little bit of sanding and then another coat, we're eventually going to fan this all the way out, probably about 8 to 10 inches away from the seam, and that's going to kind of help us hide the change in the height that we've added that material. Once we have that all smoothed out, you can see here on the wall, it looks like a nice flat area here, and then we're going to go ahead and add our texture. There are a couple different textures out there. Most commonly you'll see in houses like a regular orange peel knockdown. You can buy those rattle cans. You can spray it, let it sit for a couple minutes, and then just hit it with your blade, and it kind of knocks it down so it's like a knockdown orange peel. You'll be surprised that if you have a good flat surface, again, a couple different layers of compound and sanding, when you go to put that texture on, it really does blend everything in. What I have here though is what they call like a skip trowel. So it's a hand texture, and everybody who does it has like their own signature kind of look. So if you ever have a crew of people doing it in one house, there'll be certain rooms that have a consistent look and other rooms have their own look. And again, it's kind of like a signature based off each person. It takes a lot of practice, and I only played with it for a little bit before I figured out I would do kind of like the cheat way. But if you ever want to know how to do a skip trowel, you're going to thin out your material a little bit. You're going to dip the edge of your blade in it, and then you're going to run your blade across the the wall at a really slight angle and just let the weight of your blade kind of skip across the top. And it's hard, but you'll see it kind of grab and create like a little skip jump of material. You're gonna do that over and over and over, and then it will create what I think is kind of like a really heavy knockdown look. But since that wasn't really working for me, I just went ahead and did what I knew I could, which is just taking a little bit of material and kind of dabbing it over and over and over, creating my own little blobs on the wall, just a little bit of material, let it sit for just a little bit, and then I would knock the top of it down to flatten it. And I could kind of get that randomized look on here. And it's not gonna look pretty until we paint it, even if you're doing that orange peel knockdown. Once you throw that paint on there, it will tie it all in. But I made sure that I had enough material all the way around, just did it by hand. And because this was a small area, I didn't mind doing that. If I was gonna do it on a big wall, I would go and practice and learn how to do it myself, or I might even hire somebody who's an expert, because when they do it, they can do it fast and it's quick, and I just haven't gotten there yet. But for this small area, I didn't mind doing it by hand and just doing it, you know, little dabs here and there. And again, you just kind of go with it, play with it a little bit, and build your skill up with this drywall work. I'm telling you, it can be invaluable. So I hit that with a fan a few times. I use the fan just to kind of speed it up because I'm trying to get this done in a couple days. Once I had that dried, I sanded it lightly to take off any of those hard edges. Again, this is where it really blends in, because with any type of texture on a drywall, they'll usually go over it one last time just to take off any hard edges. And that way, when you paint over it, everything looks nice and smooth and cohesive. So I hit it with that sandpaper, and then now I'm ready to paint. Once I put all the paint on here, you can see now that everything looks seamless. Everything looks like it was. In my opinion, you will never even notice it was there unless I pointed it out. I obviously can pick it out because I did it myself. But here, as you can see, it blends right in. And then once we put the mirror up and we have everything in place, it looks like it never happened. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. Any tips or tricks that you might have for me, things that you want to see in future videos. But either way, I appreciate you all watching. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next build.